No.
We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. Professor Schwartz is with us from over at Vanderbilt. It's good to have him on, specializing in American foreign policy and relations, and certainly that plays in with Ukraine, which we are talking about today. Waiting through the break was Michael. Let's take his phone call. Michael, good morning. What's on your mind, Michael?
Hey, good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to be as brief as possible.
Okay.
Good morning, Dr. S. Hey, this is my thing. Number one, the U.S. is not dependent on Russian oil. A very minimal amount of oil that we purchase from Russia. Our gas prices have been going up for the last year and a half. The war right now is just a justification to say, okay, this is why gas prices are going up. Been going up since 2020, start of COVID. Second part of this, Russia is a bully. Eventually, we are going to have a boots on the ground war with Russia. It's inevitable. Patton predicted it at the end of World War II, said while we're here, we might as well fight Russia. Eventually, it's going to come. Two biggest bullies on the block eventually are going to have to fight. Europe needs to go back into their Cold War status and prepare their military.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, I hope that doesn't come to be where you have to have boots on the ground. It's the last thing, but I mean, he may be right, depending on how far Russia wants to push.
Well, you know, we could also go back to the old Cold War policy of containment. I mean, that was the idea of containment, was you put up a line and say this far and no further. And in a way, the president has done that with NATO, saying that we're going to defend every inch of NATO territory. So there's an argument for containing rather than trying to fight Russia right now, although the whole premise of containment was that Russia was a threat. And we have not had that thinking for a long time.
So, you know, this is our final segment. We know the sanctions. What more do you think we can see the U.S. and the allies do to put the squeeze? Is it now the focus on how many countries will decide to cease buying oil from Russia, which I saw some of the cuts that have already been done, and if the U.S. is out, I mean, Russia was taking in like $100 million a day. And all of a sudden that goes away. Don't tell me that doesn't hurt. And I got to think Putin maybe didn't think it would get to this point. If it did, maybe he's prepped for it. Maybe he recognized, I'm going to do this. I know they're going to basically shut us down for business and we're going to lose everything, but I still think we can pull it off. Or, you know, losing $100 million a day, I don't see how that doesn't eventually start putting the squeeze on you.
Yes, I think that could have an effect, but I think the more important thing is probably Ukrainian resistance.
Okay.
And as long as the Ukrainian resistance prevents him from taking the government down and putting in a new government and creates a situation where it's really not tenable, because the one thing that you could have a real effect on Russian opinion is lots of Russian soldiers getting killed, and that having an effect on people back in Russia. Yeah. So I think supporting the Ukrainian resistance in whatever ways we can that doesn't endanger the risk of a direct confrontation with Russia is probably the way to go. The economic sanctions will work over a long period of time, but in the immediate case, we have to probably help Ukrainians.
Okay, so we see, and I'll tell you, the resistance to me has been absolutely inspirational, and so has their leader, okay? And it'll be in history that way. But what more can we do? We see, you know, Americans here, all kinds of fundraising efforts and monies and such. So now, where are the Ukrainians getting their guns?
Well, they're getting them from Poland, from the bordering regions coming into the west.
Okay, so they're getting guns. Why wouldn't the U.S. allow Poland to give the planes?
I think this was one of those cases where they feared that was too public a statement of NATO involvement.
Okay.
And so that
it's got to be more subtle than that.
It's got to be much more careful.
Okay, but they're getting weapons, and the way they're fighting back and staying their ground, and thanks to social media, you got Zelensky on there all the time, posting every day something new and urging on and all of this.
But the danger is, you know, Russia has an incredible amount of firepower. And not that I think this will happen, but they could take out Zelensky if they got the right location with their firepower. They could do more damage to Kiev.
If they knew where he was and could, do you not think they would?
I hope not, but
I mean, you would then be martyred.
They would martyr.
But still, if you're just going to overwhelm.
I know, and I mean the danger is Russia is going to escalate. The CIA director who was speaking to Congress yesterday said Russia is likely to get more destructive as much as it's frustrated.
Because he basically said, based on intelligence, that Putin is quite frustrated.
Right, and that they'll lash out with more destructive means.
Real quick, last call from Cynthia. Cynthia, go ahead. You've got about 30 seconds.
Oh, great. Okay, so I was thinking of this whole conflict like you would a chess game. So the king is the most important piece on the board to protect. And so we're going to say that king is democracy or freedom. Now you've got the rook, you've got the bishop, but you don't have, let's say we don't have the knight. And the may be either Germany stepping up more, or perhaps that's in the West. But in the East, we're looking at China, and I know that's a problem because they're a communist country.
Yeah.
So perhaps if a country that Russia fears, which I think is China, and the other hand, maybe Iran, and they were to step up, which I know would be difficult because they don't believe in democracy, but particularly China, if we could put more pressure on China, that might make a difference. Thanks.
Thank you for your call. I like her chess game analogy. There sure are a heck of a lot of pieces in this.
Yes.
You know, and I don't know. You touched on China at this point.
China would be a factor. If China could be persuaded to pressure Putin to end the conflict, that could work because China has great influence there.
Yeah.
Iran, not in the same way.
Right.
China certainly.
So we would have to find, the rest of the world would have to find a way, in my opinion, to make China understand that it would be worth their while to do this. They're not going to do it just because they know it's wrong that Putin's going into Ukraine. But if they knew, listen, if we don't, it's going to hurt us, but this would be worth our while. No. If we stepped in and at least got Putin to pull back, then, you know, in a lot of ways, they'd be viewed as heroes.
I don't know that we'd view them as heroes.
Well, if you could link it to them pulling out of Ukraine,
possibly, because I think in the end they would do it for their own self-interest and their own behavior on human rights and everything else makes it harder to see that. But you're right that they could portray for their own population.
But I just don't see that happen.
I don't right now.
Yeah.
But
wow. All right. Well, listen, this is fascinating. We had an awful lot of calls. It just tells you a lot of people here are watching. It's surreal at night when you watch the network news or whenever, you know, and you see just the images coming from them. I was going to talk to you about, you know, they're talking about war crimes. And a war crime is basically bombing hospitals, killing children and civilians. And it seems like that's happening. Yeah. Of course, I almost think it's an oxymoron, war crime, and, you know, rules of war. And there are rules of war, I think, for good reason to a degree, but again, you're killing people. I've always found, I wrestle with that. Yeah. Why are there any rules in war? Yeah, it's okay to kill some, but not others. I understand not bombing a hospital, but still, you're there to conquer. And that's what we see Russia doing right now.
No, it is, and they have certainly behaved that way in Syria.
It's absolutely awful. Hey, listen, Professor, just up still. There we go. Okay. We're not wearing masks, but it's good to see you.
It's good to see you.
We'll see you again sometime soon. We'll definitely talk about this again sometime soon. Take a break, wrap things up right after this.